The moment I stopped being available to everyone, everything in my life shifted. People who ignored me for months suddenly couldn't get enough of my attention. Money started flowing differently. Relationships transformed overnight. And the strangest part? I didn't chase anyone or anything anymore. I simply withdrew. What I'm about to share with you will challenge everything you think you know about human nature, success, and the hidden power of absence. Stay until the end, because the final insight I'm going to give you, it's the one that changes everything. Hidden power. There's something they don't teach you in school, in self-help books, or in those endless courses about success and relationships. It's this uncomfortable truth that most people spend their entire lives running from. Your availability is killing your power, not just your personal power, but your magnetic presence, your ability to attract what you truly want, and your capacity to command genuine respect. When you're always available, always responsive, always saying yes, always accommodating everyone else's needs and timeline, you're not being kind or generous, you're being forgettable. You're teaching the world that your time has no value, that your energy is infinite, and that your presence is guaranteed. And when something is guaranteed, it becomes worthless. Think about the people in your life who command the most respect, who seem to attract opportunities effortlessly, who others genuinely seek out and value. They're never the ones desperately available at every moment. They're the ones who understand something profound about human psychology that most never grasp. Scarcity creates value, and presence becomes powerful only when absence is possible. But this goes deeper than simple relationship dynamics or business tactics. This touches the very core of how you relate to yourself and the world around you. When you're constantly available, you're operating from a place of fear. Fear that if you're not there, people will forget you. Fear that if you don't respond immediately, opportunities will slip away. Fear that your worth is tied to how useful you can be to others in any given moment. This fear-based availability creates a pattern that destroys your inner peace and external magnetism. You become reactive instead of responsive. You lose touch with your own rhythm, your own needs, your own center. You start living life on everyone else's terms, and slowly, imperceptibly, you begin to disappear even to yourself. Deep recognition. Here's what most people don't realize about availability. It's not about being there for people when they genuinely need you. It's about the energy you carry, the boundaries you maintain, and the space you create for others to truly appreciate your presence. When you're always available, you rob others of the opportunity to miss you, to value you, to recognize what they have when you're there. I learned this the hard way. For years, I was the person everyone called when they needed something. I answered every text immediately, said yes to every request, showed up for everyone else's priorities while my own dreams collected dust. I thought I was being a good person, a reliable friend, a valuable team member. What I was really doing was training everyone around me to take me for granted. The shift began when life forced me to step back. Not by choice initially, but by circumstance. I found myself in a position where I simply couldn't be available the way I used to be. And something remarkable happened. The people who truly mattered found ways to reach me. The opportunities that were meant for me waited. The relationships that had real substance deepened, while the superficial ones naturally fell away. But the most profound change wasn't external, it was internal. When I stopped being constantly available to others, I became available to myself for the first time in years. I remembered what my own thoughts sounded like, without the constant noise of other people's needs and demands. I reconnected with my own desires, my own goals, my own rhythm of being. This is where the real transformation begins, not in manipulating others through artificial scarcity, but in reclaiming your own energy, your own time, your own life force. When you stop hemorrhaging your attention and presence to anyone who asks for it, you begin to accumulate power. Not power over others, but power within yourself. Sacred boundaries. Boundaries are not walls. They're not about shutting people out or becoming cold and unavailable. True boundaries are about honoring the sacred nature of your energy and creating space for what truly matters to flourish. When you have no boundaries around your availability, you're essentially saying that everyone else's urgency is more important than your peace. Everyone else's convenience is more valuable than your purpose. The energy you carry when you have healthy boundaries is completely different from the energy you carry when you're desperately available. There's a groundedness, a centeredness, a quiet confidence that others can feel immediately. You're not running around trying to prove your worth through your usefulness. You're simply being, and that being has weight, has presence, has impact. This shift affects every area of your life in ways you might not expect. In relationships, people begin to treat you differently when they can't take your presence for granted. They listen more carefully when you speak because your words aren't constant background noise. They appreciate your time because they can't assume it's always theirs for the taking. In work and career, your contributions carry more weight when they're not diluted by constant availability. Your ideas have more impact when they're not competing with the endless stream of immediate responses and reactive solutions. Your leadership emerges naturally when others can't rely on you to handle everything they don't want to deal with themselves. But perhaps most importantly, your relationship with yourself transforms. You begin to understand your own value not through external validation or constant utility, but through the simple recognition of your own inherent worth. Your time becomes precious because you treat it as such. Your energy becomes focused because you're no longer scattering it in every direction. Inner magnetism. There's a magnetism that comes from being centered in yourself that no amount of trying to please others can replicate. When you're not constantly available, you're forced to develop other qualities. You become more intentional with your words, more purposeful with your actions, more selective with your energy. This intentionality creates a presence that draws people in rather than pushing them away. Think about the most magnetic people you know. They're not the ones desperately seeking attention or constantly making themselves available. They're the ones who seem comfortable in their own skin, who have an inner fullness that doesn't depend on external validation. They give you their full attention when they're with you, but they're not anxious about when they'll see you next. They care deeply, but they're not attached to outcomes. This is the paradox of true availability. When you stop being constantly available, you become truly available. Available to be fully present in the moments that matter. Available to show up with your whole self rather than the scattered, depleted version that comes from overextension. Available to respond from a place of choice rather than obligation. The people who recognize this quality in you are the ones worth having in your life. They understand that your time and energy are gifts, not entitlements. They appreciate your presence because they can't take it for granted. They engage with you more meaningfully because they can't rely on surface-level interactions to maintain the connection. Energetic shift. When you stop being available to everyone and everything, your entire energetic signature changes. You're no longer broadcasting the frequency of desperation, the undertone of "please value me" that comes with constant availability. Instead, you begin to emulate a different kind of energy entirely. An energy that says, "I am here by choice, not by obligation. I am present because I want to be, not because I have to be." This shift is palpable to others, even when they can't articulate what's different about you. They sense that something has changed, that you're operating from a different place. Some people will be confused by this change, especially those who were benefiting from your constant availability. They might test your boundaries, try to guilt you back into old patterns, or even express frustration with your newfound selectivity. This is where your commitment to yourself is tested. It's easy to maintain boundaries when no one is challenging them. It's much harder when people you care about are expressing disappointment or confusion about your unavailability. But this is precisely when maintaining your boundaries becomes most important. Because you're not just protecting your time and energy, you're teaching others how to treat you and modeling what self-respect looks like. The people who truly matter will adjust to your new boundaries and often end up respecting you more for having them. They recognize that someone who values their own time and energy is someone worth knowing. They understand that your selective availability makes your presence more meaningful, not less. Relationship alchemy. Something profound happens in your relationships when you stop being constantly available. The superficial connections naturally fall away, while the meaningful ones deepen and strengthen. You discover who was genuinely interested in you as a person versus who was simply using you as a convenient resource. This process can be uncomfortable at first. You might find that some relationships were more one-sided than you realized. Some people might disappear from your life when you're no longer available to meet their every need. But this isn't a loss. It's a clarification. You're finally seeing the true nature of these connections without the fog of your desperate availability clouding your vision. The relationships that remain and grow stronger are the ones based on mutual respect, genuine care, and authentic connection. These people appreciate you for who you are, not just what you can do for them. They understand that healthy relationships require space to breathe, time to miss each other, and the freedom to be unavailable sometimes. In romantic relationships, this shift can be particularly transformative. When you're not constantly available to your partner, you maintain your individual identity and interests. You bring more to the relationship because you're not losing yourself in it. Your partner gets to be with the full, complex, interesting person you are, not the diminished version that comes from complete availability. This doesn't mean playing games or being artificially unavailable. It means maintaining your own life, your own interests, your own goals, and your own need for solitude and reflection. It means being fully present when you're together and fully yourself when you're apart. Professional transformation. The workplace is where the power of selective availability becomes most apparent and most profitable. When you're not constantly available to every request, every meeting, every crisis, something interesting happens. People begin to recognize that your time has value, and they become more thoughtful about how they use it. Your contributions carry more weight when they're not diluted by constant availability. Instead of being seen as the person who will handle anything and everything, you become seen as the person whose input is valuable, whose time is precious, whose involvement in a project indicates its importance. This shift doesn't happen overnight, and it requires courage. You have to be willing to say no to some things in order to say yes to the things that truly matter. You have to resist the urge to be helpful in every situation, and instead focus your energy on the areas where you can have the greatest impact. The paradox is that by becoming less available, you often become more successful. Your focused attention produces better results than scattered attention across multiple priorities. Your selective engagement means you're involved in projects and decisions that actually matter. Your boundaries create respect, and respect creates opportunities. Internal revolution. But the most profound change happens within you. When you stop being constantly available to others, you become available to yourself in a way that might feel foreign at first. You remember what silence sounds like, what your own thoughts feel like when they're not constantly interrupted by other people's needs and demands. This internal availability is where the real transformation occurs. You begin to reconnect with your own desires, your own goals, your own dreams that might have been buried under years of serving everyone else's agenda. You start to understand what you actually want, not what you think you should want based on others' expectations. The anxiety that comes with constant availability begins to fade. You're no longer living in a state of hypervigilance, always ready to respond to the next request or crisis. Your nervous system begins to regulate as you create space between yourself and the constant demands of others. In this space, your intuition begins to strengthen. When you're not constantly reacting to external stimuli, you can hear your inner wisdom more clearly. You make better decisions because they're coming from a place of clarity rather than reaction. You choose your responses rather than defaulting to automatic availability. Spiritual dimensions. There's a spiritual dimension to availability that most people never consider. In many wisdom traditions, there's an understanding that constant external engagement prevents the deep inner work that leads to genuine growth and enlightenment. When you're always available to others, you're rarely available to the deeper aspects of yourself. The practice of selective availability becomes a form of meditation, a way of cultivating presence and awareness. When you're not constantly responding to external demands, you can observe your own patterns, your own reactions, your own habitual ways of being. This observation creates the possibility for transformation. Solitude, which becomes possible when you're not constantly available, is not loneliness. It's a return to yourself, a reconnection with the source of your own power and wisdom. In this solitude, you begin to understand that your worth doesn't come from your usefulness to others, but from your inherent nature as a conscious being. This spiritual dimension of unavailability affects how you show up in the world. You're no longer desperately seeking validation or approval through constant service. You're coming from a place of fullness rather than emptiness, offering your gifts from overflow rather than depletion. Mysterious attraction. When you're not constantly available, you become mysterious in the best possible way. Not mysterious through deception or manipulation, but mysterious through depth, through having an inner life that doesn't revolve around others, through being someone who has substance beyond their immediate utility. This mystery is attractive because most people are completely transparent in their availability. They're always accessible, always predictable, always responding in the same ways. When you break this pattern, you stand out. You become someone worth getting to know more deeply because there's clearly more to you than meets the eye. People are drawn to those who seem to have something going on beyond the immediate interaction. When you're not desperately available, it suggests that you have interests, passions, goals, and a life that exists independent of them. This independence is attractive because it indicates strength, self-sufficiency, and depth. But the attraction goes beyond surface-level intrigue. When someone has healthy boundaries around their availability, it signals emotional maturity, self-respect, and the kind of inner strength that others want to be around. These are the qualities that create lasting attraction, not just temporary interest. Economic impact. Your relationship with availability directly affects your economic reality. When you're constantly available, you're essentially communicating that your time has little value. You're training clients, employers, and collaborators to expect immediate responses and constant accessibility, which devalues your work and your worth. Professional boundaries around availability often lead to increased income and better opportunities. When your time is scarce, it becomes valuable. When your attention is selective, it becomes precious. When your involvement in a project is not guaranteed, it becomes sought after. This doesn't mean being difficult to work with or artificially creating scarcity. It means being intentional about how you spend your professional energy and communicating clearly about your availability and boundaries. It means charging appropriately for your time and not apologizing for having limits. The most successful people understand that their availability is one of their most valuable assets. They protect it carefully, allocate it strategically, and never give it away for free. This approach creates a cycle of increasing value and opportunity that benefits everyone involved. Freedom paradigm. Ultimately, changing your relationship with availability is about freedom. Freedom from the exhausting cycle of constant responsiveness. Freedom from the anxiety of always being on. Freedom from the resentment that builds when you're always giving but rarely receiving. Freedom to choose how you spend your precious time and energy. This freedom isn't selfish, it's necessary. When you're free to choose your availability, you can show up more fully when you do choose to be present. Your relationships improve because they're based on choice rather than obligation. Your work improves because you're engaged by decision rather than default. The fear that keeps most people trapped in constant availability is the fear that they'll be forgotten, replaced, or deemed unimportant if they're not always accessible. But the opposite is true. When you're always available, you become background noise. When you're selectively available, you become a meaningful presence. Final truth. Here's the final insight that changes everything. Your availability is not a gift you give to others. It's a boundary you set for yourself. Every yes to someone else's demand on your time is a no to something else in your life. Every immediate response is a delay to your own priorities. Every constant accommodation is an abandonment of your own needs. When you understand this, everything shifts. You realize that protecting your availability isn't selfish, it's self-preserving. It's not about rejecting others, it's about honoring yourself. It's not about being unavailable, it's about being available to what truly matters. The moment you stop being available to everyone and everything, you become available to your own life in a way you never have before. You discover who you are when you're not constantly responding to who everyone else needs you to be. You find your center, your purpose, your power. And paradoxically, when you become truly unavailable to the wrong things, you become powerfully available to the right things, the right people, the right opportunities, the right version of yourself. This is not about becoming cold or disconnected. This is about becoming conscious. Conscious of where your energy goes. Conscious of what deserves your attention. Conscious of the difference between being responsive and being reactive. Your life will never be the same once you understand this truth. The people meant to be in your life will appreciate and respect your boundaries. The opportunities meant for you will wait for your consideration. The version of yourself you're meant to become will finally have the space to emerge. Stop being available to everything and you become available to what matters. Stop giving your energy away unconsciously and you discover what it feels like to be truly powerful. Stop living on everyone else's terms and you finally begin living on your own. The change starts now, not tomorrow, not when conditions are perfect, not when everyone else approves. Now, with the next request for your immediate attention, with the next demand on your time, with the next opportunity to choose yourself over the endless need to be available to everyone else. Your unavailability is not a rejection of others, it's an acceptance of yourself, and that acceptance changes everything.